Hi there, everybody. This is Jenny Clark with Solvability, and you're here for another session of Freedom Friday. I am so excited today to have Raymond Kemp on our show to talk about what he's been doing since he left the military. And I think he was on a ship. I think he ran everything on the ship. And whenever I think about Raymond, I think about leadership. But I got a game just for you, Raymond. Battleship, because you're always asking people, where are we? Where are our people? Where are the bad guys? What do you need to know? And I know your top things that you like talking about, Raymond, are resilience, loyalty, and confidence in youth. You can talk about anything today, but I'm going to let you start talking and introduce yourself a little better than I did, and just share with everybody what your thoughts are today.
Well, Jenny, first of all, let me tell you, thank you for hosting Freedom Friday. What a pleasure it is to be here Friday and absolutely having a good time with the opportunity to chit chat about leadership with people who care about it. And so that's what drew me into you. By way of background, it is true. I served in the world's finest Navy for 33 years. That is true. Yeah, we do walk on water, those of us who sail the seas. And it was truly an interesting experience. Right now, I'm not at my own house. I'm at my aunt's place in El Reno, Oklahoma. I live down in Dallas, but Oklahoma is where my roots are, and it's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to share with you from there. So my journey began in Oklahoma, and I joined the Navy and I served on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States. I lived in Japan for a number of years, lived in Naples, Italy, where my headquarters was when I retired. I was the Fleet Master Chief of Europe and Africa, responsible for those two areas of responsibility. Absolutely loved it over there. And then when it comes to sailor stories, I've got those. So I started in 1986. Visited every inhabited continent, the East Coast and the West Coast of every inhabited continent. So perhaps one day, looking at the bottom of a red Solo cup in the backyard, we can have a conversation about what that means. Or perhaps you have the opportunity to chat with Gabby after we have coffee next week, and she can fill you in on her version of the stories that I tell her.
Well, I wanted to ask you when you were getting ready to talk about, I was going to ask you who you played poker with, and we don't need to discuss that right now, but I think that'd be fascinating.
Yeah, between poker, spades, and dominoes, there's definitely some good stories, and shared cigars and calamity on the golf course. But if I could tell you, the reason I like to talk about the youth is that so many people look at young folks these days, and by young, I mean 33 and below, that we would call early entry, into the military. Those folks, people look at those folks and these millennials, they want everything fast. They don't know what it's like not to have a microwave. The TV's always been in color. They've always had the internet machine. They're lazy, pop, pop, pop. But to me, it may be true for some, but to me, what I know is that when I look out on the deck of an aircraft carrier upon which I was the command master chief, and I see those 700 people, 770 people in air department who are responsible for launching and recovering aircraft, who are responsible for the maintenance on those aircraft to ensure that they go out and do what they're supposed to do. The people who are in operations, who are technologically in control of the aircraft as it moves about. And by the way, the information system that goes on there, I'm quite comfortable with them. I was on board Harry S. Truman as the command master chief, and we were riding alongside another ship that was providing for us fuel, parts, and material. We had guests on board from various different walks of life, because on the flagship, that is on board the largest ship in the group, usually we have VIPs that come out and visit with us. That is the very important people. And one of the CEOs that was there from an organization was asking me about the crew. And I was telling them, where folks were from and so forth. Now we're riding on a multi-billion-dollar, ship in the middle of the ocean, right alongside another ship, transferring easily 1 million gallons worth of fuel. The driver of the ship was from Alabama. Our first name was Teresa, young sailor. she was, I think she wasn't 18, she was 19 years old. And so the CEO of this company asked her, where are you from? And just chit chat like old folks do, just making young people feel comfortable. And she says, I'm from Alabama, from Mobile. And he said, well, how long you been driving the ship? She's the master helmsman, the master keyword helmsman. So she's the one responsible for driving the ship. Short story, just to make a long story short, he found out that she's young. She doesn't even have a driver's license, but she is skilled enough to hold this ship alongside another ship in the middle of the ocean at a high rate of speed with the appropriate measure of winds, and transfer millions of dollars worth of millions of gallons of the particular fuel that we were bringing on board that day. And he was just amazed by it. And as he was leaving, he was like, how do you make it happen with these young people? Because she's just one who was driving the ship. The same thing could be said about the folks that are on the flight deck that are launching and recovering aircraft, the same ones down below who are cooking and preparing the food, the same ones down below who are in the reactor space, which provides propulsion for the entire ship, or engineering, which provides electricity. And what I told him was, I'm extremely confident in the, you might be hearing the train driving by. I'm extremely confident in the youth of America when you give them the proper tools, parts, and materials to do the job. You create an environment of expectation of excellence within that group of people. And then you begin with the why it's important, to our nation. And so that young lady who was driving the ship understood that it was important that we maintained the course and speed necessary to get the fuel to launch the aircraft, to, by the way, make their way over to the combat zone and provide, our nation's bidding, particularly against a certain enemy. And she understood the value of it. It wasn't just that she was driving the ship; it was that the world was depending on us. Because if it is important to the U.S. Navy, that means it's important to our government. And if it's important to our government and to the United States, that means it's important to the world, because we're world leaders. And they understood that. And so with young people, Jenny, and to the team, what I recognize the most, if you give those basics, then they'll perform at a high level. But having that measure of formality amongst that group of people is important. What I also discovered when it comes down to loyalty and resilience, the one thing that will drive folks regardless of age is letting them know how much you care. People really don't know, people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you make that clear, whether it be through conversation or whether it be through the things that you are providing for them above and beyond, a listening ear, that will create an environment where when people know that you care about them, they feel a part of the team, they understand their why, and how it is impactful and influencing the entire world in our case, then their measure of loyalty will be gigantic. And that loyalty, along with confidence, creates that measure of resilience where people always want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of the team. I was on board that ship years and years ago. I wore a t-shirt today that had Harry S. Truman on it, because I remember the teamwork, the camaraderie, and the family that was developed in that group. And so those three things are my favorite things, Jenny, as you brought up to talk about. And that's the why behind it.
Well, it's so important what you're talking about, because I'm always wanting to relate this back to those of us that are involved in federal contracting, because when so many veterans leave the military, they're still looking for a sense of mission. And those that start federal contracting companies want to keep that connection. What's different about the entrepreneurs that I've talked to, is they'll talk about not the people who work for me, they'll call it my employee family.
Right.
It's a different mindset. And I feel like that's part of the reason why I share such a connection with anybody's that's been in the military, because my dad was Navy. Two of my brothers were corpsmen. I've got one nephew on active duty now. And I felt like I grew up in the military, and it's something that I totally gravitate to and identify with. So talk to me about the importance of family and how you show people to keep that as part of their connection as they move forward in getting even outside of the military.
Absolutely. So, the thing about families, and I'm super glad that my brother Carl Arthur is on the call. The thing about families is that, there's a measure of commitment and dedication to family that is, unspoken. He's my brother. I'm going, to the end with him. He has taken time out of his super busy schedule to help me come up with creative ideas because that's an area that I'm not necessarily so strong in. And what happens, especially in the combat of arms, is it's almost a natural thing because you get close enough to people. Again, starting with care from the leadership perspective, but you get close enough to people to see those areas that they may not be so strong in, and then you fill in the gap and then show them how to get strong in those areas. And that measure of care, that commitment to excellence and the fair treatment of all, creates that environment where we have become a family. I need you, you need me. You are, absolutely outstanding, and it's a we, not me environment. And sometimes on a smaller ship, I've served on guided missile destroyers as well, which is the workhorse of the Navy, about 510 feet long, with about 300 people of max capacity. And you need one another to operate and to maintain that ship. And so in some environments, it's a bit forced, but on an aircraft carrier, upwards beyond 5,000 people, in that environment, I've got 700 people, for example, in the air department. They can do it all themselves. But when you create that measure of trust, you create the inquisitiveness about what other people are doing, a curiosity, then you to share amongst one another and realize that, whoa, we are way, as we say in NATO, we are stronger together. And so that sharing, that caring creates that relevant relationship, and then it becomes a family environment.
Well, Raymond, you're talking about really what is a difference maker in what we're all trying to create as part of this community I'm calling GovCon Summit. You gave a perfect example. The difference between serving on an aircraft carrier and serving on that smaller ship. Because when I talk about companies that want to be successful in government contracting, the process in federal contracting until COVID was to go to the big conferences, spend a lot of time and energy, and there's a lot of glad handing, a lot of transactions, not a lot of relationship building. And what's different inside our GovCon Summit community is I do want it to feel like family. I want it to feel like a conversation around a kitchen table. I want people to feel like they can walk into a situation that we all have a certain level of training, loyalty, and trust that attracted us there and kept us there. So how do you really foster that feeling when you're walking into a brand new situation?
Well, in the new situation, I think the most important thing is to show a genuine measure of curiosity. And when you're able to tell the stories, I think that is something that we really capture. So, as in the GovCon Summit, I would imagine there are relationships that are built that are some that are give and take, and then those who have been in there longer perhaps have the larger contracts, larger groups, and they're able to share with those smaller groups, hey, here's how we did it. And so when you have the openness of a relationship to where, I don't want to say transparent, but when you have the openness of relationships where, look, I have made my way here, and here's a way that I can help you if you're willing to take it, then you create that synergy. And so in going into a new environment, I think the first thing that must be established is your willingness to listen, the willingness to show people that you're looking to learn the best and most effective and efficient ways to do business. And those who have been there before you, perhaps even longer, are the key folks to get to first and have those conversations. And then, develop an alliance, with groups that are just entering in as well. So when the new people are coming in, for example, on board a ship, what we have them do is they organize themselves together. In the first month that or 3 months that they're on board a ship, for example, they are all connected. And then as they break out into their various different professions, they still have that group of people that they started off with. And so I would imagine in the summit, it would have been easy to go in and kind of recognize the newness of the people who were there, and then ally with them as they go out to, booth to booth, as I imagine it, and have those conversations. And where now, in this environment that we're in, it's important, whether it be a Zoom meeting, and I've already written Stephen's information down. There may be an occasion, where I need some help with something creative. But the thing is, even if I don't, I know somebody who will, and I've already have a point of contact that I can point them towards. And I think that synergy, sincere, authentic synergy, is the best way to establish that in an environment like this team.
Well, you're so right about that, Raymond, about synergy. And as people come into GovCon Summit, I've done it 5 years, 5 years up till this.
Wow.
And what I've learned is that the people that are telling me, you've got to give me a reason to come. Okay, those are not my people, because they're not the people that are willing to share and give. And what I've noticed about it, and I think people have talked about the camaraderie of the military, and we have a sense of camaraderie also inside GovCon Summit. What you're talking about when you talk about bringing the people that are new to it, it's almost like I should create a cohort for the people that are new, and maybe those that have been in the past might be something else. The other thing I've done this year is broken into what I call alliance groups or alliance membership, so that they can feel like I'm grouped with some people that are similar, but they're not limited to that group. And that's the important part. Just like anytime that you come into a new situation, you always feel like I'm the new person. I don't know anybody. And how do you make them feel comfortable? And I feel like the thing that has worked so well with your leadership in the military is there was always a time where you could sense as a leader somebody that was struggling, couldn't you?
Absolutely. And the thing too is when you have those folks who have gone before, one way of expressing that level of care I talked about earlier is by the willingness to ask the question. That person who has mastered the GovCon environment and is willing to go to that starter and say, how's it going? What do you think should be happening? How do you think this process should work? Okay, well, if you don't mind, let me share how it has worked for me, and then create an environment. And I'm not saying you want people to just jump in and be mentors, sponsors, but mentors and sponsors are very important. And so when you enter in as the new person, someone who is willing to humbly ride alongside you and help you say, hey, here's how you can catch up. Or here's how you can get comfortable in this environment. And here are some things I'd like to suggest. Then that again is that level of care and creates that environment where folks are trusting to one another. In a very harsh way in the military, sometimes I might say, shit, mate, get your finger in my belt loop and keep up. But that's still, a way of me, showing a level of care, because one, when you link on to me, I'm going at a high rate of speed. Now you are too. And I'm going to be navigating in such a way to avoid navigational hazards, and you are too. And that creates that trusting environment. So I would say that within GovCon, that's just a great opportunity to do the same thing.
Well, it's also a sense of feeling protected and protective of others. And to me, it's a sense of belonging. And when we were first starting this, I was looking at all the books behind you and asking you if that was a setup. And you said, no. Tell us some more. How important is learning?
Oh my goodness, let me tell you what, a lifestyle of learning, a lifestyle of education, pursuit of increased and higher levels of learning is super crucial. There's three things that we used to weigh upon heavily: lifestyle of education, a lifestyle of fitness, and treating people with dignity and respect. Those three things were the staple in various different environments. But the ability to read and experience and have an experience without having to experience it, and that's what I mean to say, is just a great opportunity. And so whether it be reading a leadership book, or reading someone's autobiography who is doing something that you aspire to do, and even sometimes, even in the casual reading, you might find your way upon a book that kind of opens up some ideas or gives language to a thought. For example, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages, and I don't know how many of you have read it, but it's a super book about relationships and so forth. But what I discovered is that that is probably one of the best, if not the best, leadership book that I've ever read, because it talks about the means by which you can speak straight to things that stimulate the thought and ideas for a person. So, for example, out of one of the sailors on board the ship, and I hope I'm not pressing time, but one of the sailors on board one of the ships I was on, the aircraft carrier, his name was Cunningham. He was from somewhere down south, and I'm standing up on this piece of gear. I'm talking to probably 600 people, and we're having some back and forth. We're getting ready to do something super hard. They were fired up. I was too. And then I said, farewell. I'll see you about the ship. And then I walked away. And as I was up on the stage, I looked down, I saw Cunningham, I gave him the nod, the Movember, the man's nod, gave him the nod. And I moved out. Later on that day, he said, see, you didn't shake my hand up on the flight deck. And I was like, damn, it was like six. I began with, Cunningham, there's 600 of y'all up there. And then I stopped and I realized, see, your language of communication is physical contact. And that physical contact is me shaking your hand. Oh, I'm in there. Bam, shook his hand with a high measure of thunder. And every time I saw him, I would shake his hand, no matter how recently I had seen him. I was walking one day on one side of the ship. I saw him on the starboard side. I saw him, walked over to the port side. He was standing there, shook his hand again, because his language was physical touch. And so that's something that if I wasn't interested in reading, I wasn't interested in trying to make myself better, wasn't interested in furthering my education, I would have never read that book. Therefore, I wouldn't have been able to communicate as effectively. So yes, indeed, Jenny and everyone, reading is definitely, and increasing your level of education is imperative to becoming a better leader and more influential in your sphere of influence, of course.
Well, I'm really so glad you brought that up, because I feel like there's certain things that you can learn by reading, certain things that you need some experience or some guidance on. And what I found is anybody that has come to me and needed some assistance from me also is teaching me something else that I don't know, especially younger people these days. I absolutely need them to be able to adapt faster. And I do get very frustrated. And I think that's part of the reason why we have GovCon Summit, because it's one of the most regulated industries in the world. It's also really critical that we do it well and do it right. And when you give me the image of the young sailors and things like that were looking to you for leadership and guidance, and they were receptive because you developed the communication style and the way of recognizing what they needed at the time they needed it.
Very early, I learned that as we teach, we learn. And so when you are willing to amplify an idea from a young person, or someone who may not have the same measure or level of access and influence that you have, but then, in your own way, give them credit or not, but they know that idea came from them, they'll be 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And then go back to, the loyalty and the resilience we talked about before, that just validates that, and again, creates more lift.
Well, what's so interesting about what you're talking about is what you're doing is giving them something they need so they can pass it along to someone else. And when we see examples of poor leadership, it's that I didn't listen to you and I wasn't able to do something. So my negativity passed on to you. And how do you accomplish something without a positive way to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a book called Legacy by James Kerr. And I happened to be in a super small group. I think there might have been four of us and him, having a conversation about the book and some of the things that he did through his research. But something he said, I believe in the book, but definitely in the conversation, is that there'll be times that you plant trees that will bear fruit that you'll never taste, and that's okay. And as leaders, we have to be willing to plant that tree and do what we can, that it will grow and bear fruit, whether we get to taste that fruit or not. I mean, every true leader is an arborist anyway. You're planting some kind of trees, and my hope is that we're planting trees that bear fruit. As the old saying goes, attitude determines your altitude. And so with a good attitude, that's like the kind of ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of leadership: attitude, belief, and character. So with the right attitude, that determines your altitude. If you believe you can achieve, that's just a real true fact. And none of those things mean anything without good character. And that is, what are you doing when people aren't watching? And so, super important.
Well, Raymond, I've just really enjoyed having you on today, talking about, what your experience has been and giving you some thoughts on leadership that we really can use. I've actually got a book list going for GovCon Summit that I'm going to have to share with everybody afterwards. But as we wrap up, Raymond, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So if you're like to hit the website, kempleadership.com is out there on the internet machine. Certainly would love to have a visitor come on out. I post just about daily leadership thought. So if you're on Twitter or Instagram, it's Raymond D. Kemp. If you want to follow me there, I'm also on LinkedIn. And if you're a Facebook user still, then Kemp Leadership or Kemp Solutions is my Facebook handle. So if you want to follow or hop on, I would love to interact. Constantly seeking to be better. And so certainly
Okay.
looking to learn and develop some of that synergy we talked about, Jenny.
All right. Well, thanks so much. It's been great having you on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.